Hi folks, Darrin Moore here, sitting in my library, and I've been poring over. Actually, I've been going back through some of my favorite books over the last couple weeks. One of which, well, all of Richard Weaver's books are very important to me, but this one in particular I've been transcribing and talking a lot about online. Visions of Order: The Cultural Crisis of Our Times. Now, of course, anybody who's followed me knows that one of my all-time favorite books is Ideas Have Consequences, that Richard Weaver wrote in 1948, which is really one of the most spectacular books you'll ever read. But it was a part of a, as Weaver conceived of it, a three-part series of books, including The Ethics of Rhetoric, and of course the Visions of Order. They all kind of go together. Also, being a corn-fed white boy from the industrialized Midwest, it was very nice to have read the Southern essays of Richard Weaver, which really explained Midwestern industrialism, that rural agricultural life mixed in with the suburban Detroit lifestyle that I had not really been able to see until Richard Weaver, the great Southerner, described it to me. So Weaver is in the great tradition with the other Southern agrarians, and so but the reason I'm starting tonight with Visions of Order is a chapter that was suggested to him by another fantastic writer who often writes above my head, and that's Eric Voegelin, who in his book The New Science of Politics suggested the title for chapter 7 in Weaver's book that I'm about to read to you, Gnostics of Education. And since Weaver was originally from North Carolina, I will use my foghorn leghorn accent to describe this for you. More than any other nation, the United States has chosen to look upon its schools at all levels as a means of education rather than mere instruction. The difference is an important one, since education means not merely the imparting of information to the mind, but the shaping of the mind and of the personality. Instruction may be limited to the transmission of facts and principles it is desirable to know as a body of knowledge, but education is unavoidably a training for a way of life. Education comprises instruction, of course, but it goes beyond instruction to a point that makes it intimately related with the preservation of a culture. Under normal conditions, the points of view that the educator instills are the points of view of that culture. And actually nothing else is possible as a settled thing, because an education and a culture working at cross purposes can only produce a conflict which has to be resolved. A conflict of this kind of serious proportions has developed in our country with the ascension to influence of the progressive theory of education. There are by now many hopeful signs, and Weaver's writing in about the mid-50s. He wrote this book from about 1954 to 1957. It was published originally in 1962. And by then, he writes that there are by now many hopeful signs that the battle has been essentially decided, and that the danger carried by progressivism is drawing to an end. The threat of Russian technological rivalry, symbolized especially by the Sputniks and other more healthful pressures, may before long produce a far-reaching changes in the dominant American educational philosophy. What I propose to discuss in this chapter may therefore long be history. May before but long be history. But since it is the kind of history from which one may learn a great deal about philosophical dead ends and educational follies, this story needs to be told in perspective, and the morals need to be drawn. It is not too much to say that in the past 50 years, public education in the United States has been in the hands of revolutionaries. To grasp the nature of their attempted revolution, we need only to realize that in the past, every educational system has reflected to a great extent the social and political constitution of the society which supported it. This was assumed to be the natural and proper thing, since the young were to be trained to take their places in the world that existed around them. They were to be indoctrinated with this world because its laws and relations were those by which they were expected to order their own lives. In the period just mentioned, however, we have witnessed something never before seen in the form of a systematic attempt to undermine a society's traditions and beliefs through the educational establishment, which is usually employed to maintain them. There has been an extraordinary occurrence, a vital educational coup d'etat carried out by a specifically inclined minority, and this minority has been in essence a cabal, with objectives radically different from those of the state which employed them. An amazing feature of this situation has been how little they have cared to conceal their objectives. On more than one occasion, they have issued a virtual call to arms to use publicly created facilities for the purposes of actualizing a concept of society not espoused by the people. The result has been an educational system not only intrinsically bad, but increasingly at war with the aims of the community which authorizes it, as we are now forced to recognize. Although the history of how this situation came about is not the principal inquiry here, a little background may make the facts seem a little less incredible. Public education was an outgrowth of the reasonable idea that people cannot remain self-governing and free if they are untaught. It grew slowly during the 19th century until the coming of industrialism created demands for certain practical branches of it. In this growth, few saw anything alarming, except perhaps a tendency to look upon universal literacy as a panacea. At one point in the development, however, there occurred a sinister change. This came about when state bureaucracies were created to set the terms and supervise the working of the expanding public school system. State legislators felt that they had to turn the actual administration of affairs over to a body of experts. In the course of time, these state departments of education became virtually autonomous in their power to define the goals, methods, and materials of public instruction. The final step came when they were able to require all prospective public school teachers throughout the high school level to take a set number of courses in a subject called education, wherein the philosophical premises and aims of the new educators were taught. This is where the real doctrinal revolution referred to above really took place. Here was an educational system within the educational system, committed to a body of methodology whose goals were defined by a philosophical sect. Now, I've said that the new education, for which the name progressive has been preempted by its advocates, is in marked conflict with our basic traditions and culture. It is not something based on American experience or European experience or any perceptive view of the history of man. It is rather something dreamed up by romantic enthusiasts, political fanatics, and unreflective acolytes of political science. These are all people looking into the future. And the future, as with all who try to protect themselves with this phrase, is their subjective feeling about the way things ought to be. We are told by them that we are living in a world of change, but the catch is that they are in charge of that change. They are the prophets of the new future, which is going to look very unlike the past. Now, there is no difficulty at all in specifying reasons for the above charge. I list below some of the chief assumptions and tenets of progressive education. The conflict between them and the principal teachings of the Judeo-Christian classical heritage of the West will be immediately apparent. Number one, there is no such thing as a body of knowledge which reflects the structure of reality, and which everyone therefore needs to learn. Knowledge is viewed as an instrumentality, which is true or false according to the way that it is applied to concrete situations, or the way that it serves the needs of the individual. Since the educators have embraced the notion that the essence of the world has changed, there is no final knowledge about anything. The truths of yesterday are the falsehoods of today, and the truths of today will be the falsehoods of tomorrow. Number 2, this being so, the object of education is not to teach knowledge, but to teach students. As they translate this into practice, it means that everything should be adapted to the child as child, to the youth as youth, and to the particular group according to its limitations. There are no ideals or standards for performance which these are bound to measure themselves by or to respect. As a corollary of the above principle, number 3 is that the child should be encouraged to follow his own desires in deciding what he should study and what aspects of what subjects and at what times. Number 4, the teacher must not think of himself as being an authority, because authority is evil. The teacher is there as a leader, but the duty of the leader is only to synchronize and cooperate with the work of the group. Number 5, the student should never be made afraid of anything connected with the school. Marks and competition are bad because they instill feelings of superiority and inferiority, which, of course, are undemocratic. Number 6, the mind is not to be exalted over the senses. Democracy requires that sensory and activist learning be valued on par with intellectual learning. The mentally slow or retarded are not to be made to feel that they are in any way lacking. It is better to impugn the whole tradition of intellectual education than to injure the feelings of the less bright and the lazy. Number 7, consequently there should be less education through symbols like language and figures, and more through the use of hands-on concrete objects. As John Dewey, the great pundit and saboteur of the revolutionary movement, said, it is more important to make maps than to learn the maps. Number 8, the general aim is to train the student so that he will adjust himself, not simply to the existing society, as is sometimes inferred from their words, but to society conceived as a social democracy. A few other propositions equally startling can be deduced from the writings of the new school educationists, but these should be enough to indicate what a complete reversal the progressivist theory represents. However, just in case the meaning of this is too revolutionary to reach the consciousness all at once, let me rephrase 2 or 3 of the central ideas. Knowledge, which has been the traditional reason for instituting schools, does not exist in any absolute or binding sense. The mind, which has always been regarded as the distinguishing possession of the human race, is now viewed as a tyrant, which has been denying the rights of the body as a whole. It is to be democratized, or reduced to an equality with the rest of the body. Discipline, the great shape of mind and body, is to be discarded because it carries elements of fear and compulsion. The student is to be prepared not to save his soul, or to inherit the wisdom and usages of past civilizations, or even to get ahead in life, but instead to become a member of a utopia resting on a false view of both nature and man. This set of propositions practically inverts our traditional idea of education, which venerates mind, recognizes the moral and practical value of discipline, and regards competition as the indispensable spur to outstanding achievement. Yet these are the very propositions which have been systematically taught by educationists for about 50 years, and which have strongly affected education on all but the university levels. Now, can you imagine what we would say today when only St. John's and a little school in the Irish Hills of Michigan are teaching the liberal arts education the way it should be taught? And he does say that even in the university level, in some areas, it has been systematically taught by the educationists, this new progressivist education. In fact, these things have been more than taught. They have been enforced as dogmas in the schools and departments of education, and more than one prospective teacher has been advised that he must accept them or be rejected by the profession. Now, where should one look for the real sources of so profound a revolt against the long accepted premises of education? Since we are dealing here with a change of great depth, it seems best not to spend time on intermediate causes, but to look for some major parallel in history and see whether this will not point to the ultimate cause. Progressive education is a wholesale apostasy involving the abandonment of fundamental and long-held beliefs about man and the world. If we are to account for it, we shall have to seek further the pressures of industrialism and other modern-day phenomena. The analysis will concern basic attitudes towards existence, so that if we search for the root of the progressive outlook, we shall perforce be dealing with questions of faith and interpretations of historical experience. There is one apostasy of a nature and a magnitude to warrant the comparison with this one, and it affords a great deal of illumination, even though it happened at a remote time, and even though its content cannot be precisely delineated. It was a subversive force in much the same way as our progressivism is in education, and although it was finally put down, it lasted long enough to produce a large amount of confusion and to cause the thoughtful to search out its fundamental errors. The thoughtful people back in its time were caused to search out its fundamental errors, and this was Gnosticism of the 1st and 2nd centuries A.D. Now what is Gnosticism? Gnosticism may be described as an attempt to reinterpret analytic Christianity in terms suited to the Enlightenment of the contemporary era, of course. It was a highly speculative system which differed from what has become canonical Christianity in two important features: its attitude towards creation and its doctrine of the nature of man. According to the Gnostics, creation was not the work of an omnipotent and benevolent creator, but rather a demiurge of limited power. I hope I said that right. Who necessarily left it finite and incomplete. In other words, it wasn't a perfect creation. Something else created it, and, well, Weaver describes it better than I will. Evil was therefore represented by the Gnostics as congenital with creation. The important consequence of this doctrine was that it taught a dualism of good and evil, in which spirit, represented by man, was good, and in which the world, at least partly, represented evil. Man was therefore superior to the created universe, and, although this cannot be set forth in the very exact terms, man was somehow charged with its improvement. The opponents of Gnosticism, both Christian and Neoplatonic, attacked the Gnostics for the presumptiveness of this attitude towards creation. For example, Tertullian, in his 5 books against Marcion, scored that famous Gnostic for his position on this matter. He wrote, "You, however, sir," you got to throw in that "sir," don't you? "You, however, are a disciple above his master, and a servant above his Lord. You have a higher level of discernment than his. You destroy what he requires. You are an enemy to the sky, and yet you are glad to catch its freshness in your houses. You disparage the earth, although the elemental parent of your flesh, as if it were your undoubted enemy, and yet you abstract from it all the fatness, all its fatness for your food." In much the same vein, Plotinus, in the Enneads, criticized the human audacity of the Gnostics. 2 people inhabit the one stately house. One of them declaims against its plan and against its architect, but nonetheless maintains its residence in it. The other makes no complaint, asserts the entire competence of the architect, and waits cheerfully for the day when he may leave it, having no further need of a house. Thus the Gnostics were consistently seen as setting themselves above creation, and holding that the material universe, for which they were not responsible, was the real source of all evil. With regards to man himself, the Gnostics taught a doctrine of perfectionism. Man did not require salvation, for he was already in a state of messianic blessedness. Since he was in this state, it was not necessary for him to submit to external authority. Now there's a little providential sign right there. Now Gnosticism, therefore, tended strongly towards antinomianism. This view of the natural blessedness of man, this view of the natural blessedness of man, coupled with the feeling of his lack of responsibility for evil, made Gnostics anti-authoritarian. When they were asked by the Christian fathers where they got their doctrines, they said that they got them from themselves. As a matter of fact, they taught that every individual has, quote, hidden deep, unquote, from which their well of thoughts, notions, and impulses. From which there well up thoughts, notions, and impulses. A modern student of Gnosticism has noted that this resembles in a number of ways the subliminal self of modern psychology. We could go on to remark that all this has a parallel. Pardon me. We could go on to remark that all this has a parallel in attempts of our progressive educationists to base everything upon psychology. The decision of the fathers to reject the Gnostic teachings was crucial for the future of Christianity, for the world of the Gnostics was a fanciful world, molded to the heart's desire, in which the religious imagination was not tied down to religious facts. Furthermore, such sociology and science as Gnosticism presumed to incorporate were not elements of strength. These consisted of fashionable doctrines of the day and would have proved increasingly a liability with the passage of time. The fathers were not seduced by the modernism of their age. The decisions which they made was not only wise for their time, but wise for any time in which this kind of choice has to be made. What they did was repudiate theorizing and adhere to the analytic and historical religion. Thus, they retained on their side the powerful support of historicity, with its facts and its traditions. These were, of course, the fruits of experience, not of conjecture and speculation. The word of a prophet is a deed, it has been said, and they adhered to the word. Debate might range far, but there was always the records, the experiences, and the traditions to return to. Today we are in a strikingly comparable situation, as enthusiasts and fanciful thinkers call upon us to abandon what we know through the annals of our education and erect a brave new world out of sanguine speculation. Just as the very authority and power of Christianity depended upon rejecting these overtures, so the authority and viability of education today depend upon our rejecting the often plausible appeals of the progressives to give up what we know historically about man and commit ourselves to their utopia. In sum, it is the contention here that the progressive educationists of our time, while not Gnostics in the sense of the historical descent, are Gnostics in their thinking. It is a further contention that their Gnosticism exhibits the same kind of delusion, fantasy, unreality, and unacceptable metaphysics which the Church Fathers, speaking out of tradition and true insight, challenged and put an end to. Finally, it is my own conviction that the doctrines of the new educationists are at least as menacing to the survival of our culture as were the doggone Gnostic heresies of the first and second centuries to the great religious and cultural tradition which has streamed down to our time. For the essence of Gnosticism is kind of a irresponsibility, an irresponsibility to the past and to the structure of reality in the present. Its teachings cannot serve as the foundations of a culture because the fact that its advocates are out of line with what is inevitably reveals itself. Where they are allowed to provide foundations, they imperil the whole structure. Well, maybe I should just skip to the, because I can't go through it all, of course, but Perhaps you'll be interested in his conclusion. Yeah, he talks about how, in very similar terms, the way that C.S. Lewis talks in The Abolition of Man, about how eventually the educationists become like what Lewis called man makers, and that they can cut us into whatever shapes they want, and from that point forward, they have so much power over everybody else that comes behind them, because they have shaped us, and they of course have made it a part of a political program, and everything very similar to the way the communists in Russia, or the National Socialists in Germany, of course, made everything had to be justified and show up with the political philosophy of the day. There could be no dissent. And so Weaver finishes his chapter by saying, it represents the most overweening attempt of Gnostic thinking to replace the natural structure of our society with their dream world, which is to substitute a subjective wishfulness for a historical reality. From the beginning I have spoken of progressive movement in education as an apostasy out of conviction that this classifies it accurately. An apostate is properly defined as one who, after making a profession of a belief, falls away from or abandons it. So with progressive educators. They profess before society a belief in education, and they are in fact supported by a society for this profession. In reality, they are attackers and saboteurs of education. This truth I have tried to show you by 2 lines of proof, namely, the apostates do not have faith in the existence of knowledge, and that their real aim is educationally illicit one of conditioning the young for political purposes. The fact that they do not believe in knowledge makes them manipulators or trainers rather than teachers, and this is the light in which we should understand their instrumentalist philosophy. The world for which the progressives are conditioning their students is not the world espoused by general society, but rather a small minority of radical doctrinaires and social faddists. They are doing things which the great majority of plain, uncorrupted individuals, from a standpoint in history and common sense, would repudiate if they could see their tendency. This subversion has gone so far that Gnostics of education, until very recently, constituted the single greatest threat to our culture, in the discredit that they have cast upon the higher facilities, in the way they have cut the young off from knowledge of excellencies achieved in the past, and in the way they have turned attention towards transient externals and away from central problems of man. They have no equal as an agency of subversion. Their schemes are exactly fitted, if indeed they are not designed to produce citizens for the secular communist state, which is the millennial dream of the modern Gnostic. To put an end to this adventure into fantasy, and to prevent the cruel awakening which would follow, we should do all we can, educationally and politically, to hasten the decline of their influence. Again, this has been the chapter Gnostics in Education from Richard M. Weaver's book, Visions of Order, The Cultural Crisis of Our Time.